FM, W237BD Boca Raton, the Health and Wealth Radio Network.
Want to lower your rate and payments, get rid of mortgage insurance, or get cash out? Find out about your best refinance options by tuning into the Get Mortgage Fit radio show with Alex Michaels and Carrie Kasem, Monday mornings from 10 to 11, where you'll learn everything you need to know about mortgage loans, today's rates, FHA, VA, and more. Call the Get Mortgage Fit show Monday mornings from 10 to 11 on WNN at 800-827-RATE, 800-827-RATE, or visit them online at newamericanfunding.com, NMLS 6606. Ready, set, ride. Remember when you were a kid and riding a bike was pure fun? It's time to rediscover that carefree feeling again with a Pedego electric bike. Pedego is the #1 brand of electric bikes in America because with Pedego, we put you and the customer service first. Pedego electric bikes are universally fun for all ages. Choose to pedal for exercise or throttle for full assist. Give Pedego Fort Lauderdale a call or stop in for a free bike ride. 954-652-1823. Come as you are and try a Pedego today, where our motto is Hello Fun. 954-652-1823. Tell them the Brooklyn Cafe sent you. The opinions expressed on the following sponsored program are strictly those of the host, guests, and callers, and not necessarily those of this station, its staff, management, or sponsors. It's Monday night at 9 p.m. and time for Sex Talk with the Siegel brothers. Dr. Ricky Siegel is a certified sex therapist, educator, and supervisor, and his brother Larry Siegel is a clinical sexologist and certified sexuality educator. The Siegel brothers are here to answer all your questions about sex and sexuality, but we're unsure who to ask, including questions you didn't even know you had. They will also welcome guests from around the globe to talk about a wide variety of topics and issues within the fascinating world of sexuality. Thank you for joining us, and welcome to Sex Talk.
Good evening. It's Monday at 9 o'clock. That means it's time for Sex Talk with the Siegel brothers. My name is Dr. Richard Siegel. I'm a certified sex therapist.
And I'm Larry Siegel, a clinical sexologist and certified sexuality educator. Great to be back.
Good to be back with you as always.
Same here.
And thank you for joining us. We are on the radio in South Florida on 95.3 FM and 1470 AM, live streaming on Facebook on the page of Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers or AMP2 TV. And you can call in if you are so inclined with questions, comments, or join the conversation. Give us a ring at 888-565-1470. And we are very happy this evening to be joined by a dear friend, my dear guest, Dr. Sharna Stryer.
It is so nice to be here.
It's really an honor. I'm really happy to introduce you to my brother Larry.
Yes.
I've wanted you guys to meet for a long time.
It is my pleasure. I've heard a lot about you.
Same here. And I have to say, you don't look like any of those things that he said.
Oh, good. We'll have to talk later, Ricky.
Bogus tissue of lies.
Yes.
No, it's really, I was saying that truly it was an honor to just, this random coincidence that happened that I just so happened to have the opportunity to supervise you towards supervisor certification, which was really kind of ludicrous because Sharna trained in Helen Singer Kaplan's program, the same as my mentor did. In New York at Cornell and what was it, Weill College of Medicine, something like that.
Something like that.
But I mean, you were there in the heyday of this field, learning with the original and with my mentor. So to think that I could teach you anything, we had a great time talking about supervision, but I certainly didn't teach you anything about sex therapy.
So welcomed.
Yeah.
But as a result of that, I've been in the field for many, many years, and what we're going to talk about today is just the trend that I am observing that I think is really quite interesting.
And I just think it's fascinating. It's an unusual niche for you to have fallen into, right?
Yes.
You're not the usual therapist to be working with millennial males.
Yes.
And that's kind of awesome, and that's one of the things we wanted to talk about tonight.
Yes.
So, any questions about how Sharna got here before we just jump right into it, or?
Well, you want to say maybe just share a little bit about your background? Tell us how you got to this place.
I'm really. I should also mention Sharna is a nurse, and always been our favorite human beings in the world. And when nurse practitioners get into doing this kind of
clinical
sexuality.
specialist.
Right.
Yes.
And I know you worked with addicts in New York City in the 70s. I read your dissertation. I
Yes.
cited it in my dissertation.
Thank you.
The background
Yes.
is just incredible.
Well, it's been really my privilege and sort of my teaching tool. All the people that I've met along my way that have shared with me their personal lives that I have, impacted and learned from, I feel so grateful. I really do. And so that's why I feel that at each time, when I notice a trend, that I need to come forward and talk about it with my peers, share in this way. And it's a trend that is interesting as a result of the digital age, of course, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I have many couples that come in, and oftentimes the female is bringing in the male as opposed to the other way around, right? And what are they saying is, he's not interested in sex. And initially, because I've become more free with my own body and my own sexuality, I approached him, and we were sexual in the beginning. And then once I sort of pulled back and I was hoping for a response from him, nothing came forward.
I hear it a lot too.
Nothing came forward. And so I began to hear this over and over again. And as I interviewed the males, the story unfolded. And so the story is, shall I go on with that?
Sure.
But I just want to ask for like a little clarification. 'Cause I think this is sort of an underpinning of all of this work that we all do.
Yes.
You have this partner that came in, says, my partner is not interested in sex. When we kind of know really the reality, point blank, is my partner's not interested in me.
Or sex with you.
Sex with me. That,
Right.
Yeah, which is what I mean.
He's plenty interested in
Yes.
sex. He's not interested in sex with
Yes.
his partner.
Exactly.
Yes.
Right. Exactly.
Yes.
And I think, and I
Yes.
just wanted just that kind of clarification, because there's so many
Yes.
things that have been spilling out of all of
Yes.
this stuff, from porn-induced ED
Yes.
to
Yes.
shutting down reward systems and all that
Yes.
kind of stuff.
Yes.
And I don't know that a lot of that stuff is true, at least at face value. There's a lot of sexual interest. It's just not with their partner.
Well, with that partner yes, they could be with partners on a random basis, and that's charged because
Right.
that's requisite variety. But with partners over time and partners that they could really love and cherish, it presents itself. And of course, as a therapist, you assume that it's somewhere in the interaction and it's somewhere in their own story. So as you do that investigating, what do you find out? Right. Well, I'm masturbating. The first time I ever had interest in sex was porn masturbation.
Right.
And the requisite variety was overwhelming. The intensity of the experience that they were getting from if it was a female or whatever they were watching, was exciting and dopamine producing. So that became their source of stimuli. That's their erotica. And so what happened is they skipped over something their prior generations learned. They never learned how to fantasize. They never learned how to trigger their own erotic impulses. So when it comes to being with a partner, whoever the partner may be, or partners, what happened is that without the porn sex, they didn't know quite how to trigger the response, and that led into some performance anxiety and problems. They also got too familiar with their own hand, and so that became a problem.
Right, can't be reproduced by any other body part.
They don't know how, exactly, they don't know quite how to do that.
I always think of that brilliant Charlie Murphy line, may he rest in peace, right? Beat it like it owes me money. Right. That's a problem for a lot of guys because that will never be duplicated in partnered sex, no matter what. Yeah.
But you know what the most critical thing is that takes time? It's like you have to do it very delicately.
Yeah.
Is to
Step by step.
help them understand that they need to be in touch with the desires of their partner, which they never really had to deal with porn masturbation. And they had to focus in on their own sensations rather than just that visual to visual.
Right.
Nice. And it seems to me there's a chicken and the egg phenomenon going on here. And I'll just use the term narcissism. So
Yeah.
is that kind of sexual narcissism a result of creating that template first with, again, the two-dimensional and having that there? Or is that something that was already there and that's why they don't have the intimacy? So in other words,
Do
did
you
the
know-
lack of intimacy help
Well, the
create the
lack of
narcissism, or
empathy-
did narcissism create the lack of intimacy?
You know, I tend not to use words like that.
Intimacy and narcissism.
I like intimacy. Narcissism, I think, particularly during these times, is
Sure,
overplayed.
yeah.
Overplayed.
Right. I mean, more self-focus.
Well,
You know, I find the millennials, which is the primary group that I work with, exciting, bright, entrepreneurial, but along the way, because of really their life experience, they're not interactive. And so,
Right.
what do you learn when you're not interactive? It's all
or
about you
interactive
and your
digitally
needs.
only.
Yes,
Right.
exactly.
There's also that whole other level of the delusion of fantasy relationships online.
Yes.
That I think affects this as well. And, you know, go to Larry's point, part of the egg would be that it's sex ed still for kind of a whole generation. As long as we continue carrying on about sex ed to the point where it doesn't happen in schools, like in the only democracy in the world, that's the only education that the kids are seeing.
Exactly. And it isn't education.
Right.
It's entertainment.
And fantasy, but they
Right.
think it's how-to instructions.
Exactly.
Right?
Yes.
This
And-
is what you do to...
Well, what they're learning is that males in particular, they don't really do anything. They just receive. And so then they're in a relationship. And if it's heterosexual, you know, the women are feeling also more empowered. They want their excitement. They want their orgasm. And that is like, they're clueless.
Yeah.
You know, and so they have to learn how to read body signals, how to tune in, and what's difficult for them is they don't have the language. So that's important, and that's part of the intervention, is beginning to set the stage of sensory focusing through sensate focus exercises, communication exercises, that kind of thing.
All the classics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think have a different significance in the context of this generation.
Exactly.
Because we can, again, when we look at all the things that we tend to ascribe to millennials,
Yes.
I think part of the reality, and there's a lot of data that has emerged on this, that as a generation, they're probably the least sexually active. They are open
they're sexually
in
active.
their own
They're
relationships.
sexually active in masturbation. They may be sexually active in hookup culture. They not. What happens is it falls away in partner sex.
Yeah.
Right. And again, looking at relationships and looking mostly at partnered sex, we see, and even just across the board, the rate of sexual activity with this generation is lower than we've ever seen it. Currently, 70-year-olds are having more sex than most millennials. We can see that there is a lack of, even within that partnered sexual context, there's a lack of, I would just say, creativity. There basically are three main positions that they generally engage in. Right? So when we look at a lot of these things,
Yeah.
right, it's easy, I think, for us as other generation people to kind of look at this judgmentally. Right? But if we look at their new normal through their eyes.
I think that's a mistake, because when we were going through, I certainly know, I mean, there was a lot to judge about us with the change of attire, with our political spirit. This is their generation.
Right, and that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Rather than being judgmental, to be able to
Yes.
see their normal, which isn't our normal,
Right.
Right.
and to be willing to
And
make
to
the
meet
accommodation
them,
to help
and
them.
to meet them at that level.
Yeah.
What I find really interesting is they go, aha. When I point out the idea that the guys particularly haven't learned to fantasize and like, wow. And so what I suggested them, they have to back off from masturbating to porn. And they have to learn
how to log on. Here, log on to sexy
the
thoughts,
fantasy.
right, Helen?
They have to begin to focus on sensation in their own bodies and to dialogue and to experiment with sensation with their partner. You know,
And to mix it up when they're by themselves. You know, righty, lefty, underhand, overhand, with condoms, without condoms, with lube, without lube.
And what I love about millennials, I don't experience much resistance. They go, yeah. They're like, give me the tool and I'm there. I must say that is unique,
You know,
and
it's
I
funny
appreciate.
too. Tell me if you don't see this also with the kids. Maybe, you know, 15 years ago, working with middle-aged couples, I noticed that, and you know, we've been talking about this for 30 years. Masturbation is such a back-tightening, awkward word with so much connotation and everything. So I sort of got into the habit of referring to it as self-pleasuring. Not just because it's much softer term, but it's more permission-giving, and it's a whole broader range of activities than just stimulating the genitals.
Yes.
But then this shift happened, right? You know, if I would talk about, I could see immediately how self-pleasuring was disarming and opening up to 40-something, 50-somethings. But when I try and use that phrase with millennials, they'd be looking at me like, do you mean masturbation? Like, oh, okay, yeah, that's like, stop with the self-pleasuring. It's masturbation, and then
the
just have a whole matter of fact.
have no, you know, they're masturbating. They don't have a problem with that. So, as a matter of fact, they kind of expect it. Now, what I found so fascinating is that about a month ago, I had an intake with a Japanese female millennial who is, and you know, in Japan,
The least amount of sex of anybody in the world right now.
they have been exposed. They're 10 years ahead. She has been exposed to porn masturbation like we see now, and she is having the same symptoms. She cannot engage in partner sex. And again, it was the same kind of intervention. Hey, the joy is in the fascination and triggering the erotica.
Right.
And you've got to stop, you know, just leaning on the porn. Isn't that the porn is bad? It's just that you have
That's
not,
what I wanted to
you
follow
have
up
not
with.
developed your capacity to do it without porn.
Or I would even say they haven't developed a context in which they can truly appreciate porn.
Yes.
Because porn has become the answer.
Yeah. Well, porn has become the go-to.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
easy.
the
easy.
ubiquity of it that makes
You
it
know,
so,
another thing with the porn masturbation and with the setup that exists, they also, you know, when they have to deal with someone's urges and desires and requests, it's like really, it can be experienced as too much.
Right.
Easier to do it by myself. Why engage?
Sure.
And I think we see that reflected in a lot of the new neuroscience, even that shows that even through social media. And I talk about, again, I'll use the word narcissism as the new drug, really.
Yes.
When we talk about, when we see
the
these
dopamine
millennials,
high.
right? And again, I get a little, it's, no, okay, I'm not going to talk about dopamine. The reward systems that light up like Christmas trees when they're talking about themselves. Yet when somebody else is talking, when they're listening to somebody, it goes dark. So I think, you know, in that bigger picture, they're kind of wiring their brains in a lot of ways to be only about themselves. So if it's a desire I have, or if it's a want that I have, I'm going to indulge it. But if it's one that you have, you know, it's a little bit too much. Don't really know how to just even allow my brain to enter into that dynamic.
That is...
Yes, that's true. Absolutely. And what goes along with that is the experience of empathy. You know, it is, it's sort of fading away. Yeah. And it's like we have to bring that back. You know, and it's interesting, there isn't even a lot written about it. But when we don't feel, how do we connect? I hear you. I understand. I can relate to what you're saying.
Well, you know, the president needed a little cheat sheet for that. Right, to say, I hear you. We
At a listening session.
We have a caller. Jacob, you have a question for us or for Dr. Stryer?
Hey, Jacob.
I mean, for whoever wants to answer it, I guess. Yeah, so I heard this interesting study kind of like relating back to like sexual desire. And it had to do with spirituality. It said that people who are more, I guess, spiritual, so I guess you could include people who are like priests or pastors, tended to be more sexual too, because the same part of your brain that deals with sexuality deals with spirituality. Like, I don't know, like, I just heard that. What do you guys have to say on that? And have you heard it before?
Especially among millennials, how have you seen that?
Interesting question. Thanks for calling in.
Jacob.
Yes, Jacob. Well, one thought that comes to mind when you say more spiritual and relaxing, I mean, when the anxiety is at a low level, when you're not focusing on performance, when you're not outside the experience, but you're more in tune with your body, then you're more likely to feel your own body rhythm, and that a big part of that is your sexual desire.
Yeah. I've never heard anything about connect. I mean, obviously, there's literature written on the connection between sexuality and spirituality, but what he's referring to, the same part of the brain being lit up, does that ring any bells? Does that lighten up any part of your brain?
Well, I mean, there are similar, what I've seen over the years are these indications where reward is reward.
I mean, look,
and the spirituality, that sense of again, the relaxation, the calm,
the ecstasy,
the ecstasy.
Before that word got forever creeped by MDMA, ecstasy is an emotional experience most often linked to a spiritual one. Joy, sexual, spiritual, that rolling.
And you know,
it's how a lot of people get high.
I think it's
religious
really
ecstasy, sexual ecstasy.
In the moment. What is joy?
Lost
you
in
feel
the
the joy when you're lost.
Complete
you're immersed.
immersion.
Deeply
Complete immersion.
flowing. You're there.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And where are most people when they're having sex? In their heads, watching themselves, criticizing themselves, worrying about.
But however, when you incorporate time to kind of melt into the experience of sexuality through touch and get into the breathing and into the rhythm and into the sensation, you're in the moment. It's like, what do people say? They say, focus on your breathing.
Sure.
Right. And, you know, we've had, you know, some of these sayings. I remember a friend of mine said this to me probably 30 plus years ago. And again, I don't think it was original. We've kind of said things like this for many years, that, you know, we're not human beings, we're human doings. So this idea of the spirituality, you know, and why I think spirituality and sexuality have really always been connected. Remember in the past, and to be honest with you, pre-Christianity, sexuality was often the way to achieve spirituality. And there was that sexual ecstasy that was considered a spiritual kind of thing.
Yes.
And I
The
think
creature with two backs.
Right, exactly.
Right?
So I think the spirituality and the sexuality, you know, where they kind of converge is in that sense of truly being in that moment.
Yes.
Being truly present and mindful and not running the different inhibitions and defenses and the interpretations of everything, just allowing themselves to experience that moment.
I like the way you say it, and if I can segue into something that has been so vital, because it's about communication that you're really talking about.
Absolutely.
And
spot on. I was just being mindful of the time and was going to try and segue. You're right on it.
I call it
beautiful.
You know, it came from, I learned from couples. One couple said, okay, we have to call it the 3 Ps of effective communication, because that goes across the board. And one is paraphrasing. So what I hear you say is that you have to be mindful of time right now, Ricky, because we're coming to the end of it. Is that right? So I better, you know, I guess plug in this stuff. Is that what you're saying?
All those therapy cliches that people are
Roger's
so quick to bust on
Yes.
work. They're cliches because they work.
Because when you paraphrase, one, you showing that you're listening. Two, secondly, you're clearing the distortions that you hear, you know, the miscommunication.
Making sure you
and
understand,
three,
right?
you don't get into your own stuff of defending.
Right.
Right.
And that's where the fight starts. When everybody's
Exactly.
defending and the claws
And
come
then
out.
what they're defending is their misinterpretations.
That's exactly. But how many times we've heard from couples, and I talk about
know.
this way too often. This idea of, that's why I will always impose
Yes.
a rule with couples.
Yes.
That if whoever said it,
Yes.
they get to explain it.
Exactly.
Their meaning and their
That's
intent is
good.
the only one that matters. Because how many people will say, well, somebody will say something, and they'll react to that and say, no, that's not what I meant. And the response is, well, that's what I heard.
Okay.
And now
Exactly.
they're off to the races.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so when you just plug in that paraphrasing, you never even get to that place.
Yeah.
Now,
This-
the other one, perception checks, is I have the perception right now that there's a nice, easy flow between us. That's my perception, that you're feeling pretty relaxed. Is that so?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Now, if I thought for a minute, if you were my partner and you came through the door and you're like, you know, and I thought, oh my God, he's mad. And I start identifying all the reasons why I think he's mad at me.
Right.
And I start adjusting my behavior accordingly, we're in trouble. As opposed to me saying, hey, Ricky, you know, you seem a little bit upset, are you?
Yeah.
And you say, no,
going
man,
on?
I just had a car ride and this guy was really pissing me off on the road and it's nothing
you
to do
following
with you. Now, the third is my favorite. This, again, came from another couple. I call it pineapple. This is the third of the 3 Ps. And pineapple is when you get into, like, a rub. You know, you just know the conversation is not working out and you're really you're heading to an argument. And you can't get out of the miscommunication. You say pineapple.
Right.
And,
like
you know, you
using
have-
a safe word.
It's
like
the
kinky
safe
boats.
word.
Right.
And it
how
diffuses because it's silly.
Well, at that point, you have the choice. You get some water, you go to the bathroom, you walk around the block, you cool off, but you need to come back to the conversation.
Absolutely. In fact, if I can take that a step further, what I often also put into it is the person that calls the timeout, the person that says the safe word again, we're talking about calling a timeout, has an obligation to call time back in.
Yes.
But those breaks are sometimes absolutely necessary, right? We
Yes.
can, especially when emotions are getting high. We cannot communicate through emotion. Right? Yet that's what also does a lot of people in.
Exactly.
Well,
exactly.
we got to wrap it up. I have to call time myself.
Boy,
Dr.
boy.
Sharna Streyer's 3 Ps. Don't you want to say PPP? Sex therapists love to say PP all the time. 3 Ps. Paraphrasing. Perception change.
Check.
Perception check.
And
And
pineapple.
pineapple.
Right.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming in and
It-
joining us
It was a
tonight.
pleasure.
Dr. SharnaStryer.com.
A lot of fun, and so nice to meet you.
Same here.
And I just want to plug Modern Sex Therapy Institute, where we train sex therapists and physicians, nurse practitioners in sexual medicine and sexuality counseling and sex therapy. You can find out more about that at modernsextherapyinstitutes.com. You've been seeing Kroll a couple times through the show. You can get in touch with me by email at ricky@modernsextherapy.com, or you can even call me 561-809-1080. We will be here next Monday at 9 and every Monday for Sex Talk with the Siegel
Yes,
Brothers.
indeed. And
Excellent.
shout out to St. Louis University. Not too many people in South Florida can say they have people listening there.
All right. Thank you.
Have a great week.
Bye. Fun.
You've been listening to Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers. Join us every Monday night at 9 p.m. on WNN, 1470 AM and 95.3 FM. Or watch live streaming video at AMP2 TV Productions on Facebook, or look for the shows on YouTube. Thanks for tuning in, and we hope you'll join us again next week.